Hello, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and please check out my channel for other Z-World updates. So the last update about Twist of Fate. Pallavi confessed to Prachi that she supported Rhea in her evil plans, and Prachi refused to leave the Kholi's house, saying that all the papers that Rhea has with her are just pieces of papers and she will not leave the house because of that. Let's continue. Prachi tells Rhea that whatever papers are there, nothing can harm me, as I was not in my senses when I signed on it. She tells Aliyah, Pallavi, and Rhea that you spiked my drink and took my signatures, so these papers are not valid in any court of this world. She says it will be asked in the court if I was in my senses when I signed on it. Rhea asks her to give the papers to her. Prachi says, how did my signatures came on these papers, and says even the court should know how I signed, and tells her that the weapon is like a marriage which cannot survive in front of her. She says whoever wants to destroy my identity, their identity will be destroyed, and she says that she will do the same thing with the papers, which is done with the useless papers. Prachi is about to burn the papers, but Aliyah says stop, nobody has cheated you, these papers are genuine. Prachi says I am taking Rhea's test. Let's see if this paper passed the test. She burns the paper, keeping on the lamp. Aliyah shouted Prachi. Grandma smiles. Prachi says it is burnt. Your truth cannot pass this test, and your dream to throw me out from here became just like a dream. She picks the ashes of the papers and blows it on Rhea. She says I don't care where to throw it. She says she is done with today's drama and says their lie cannot stand by her and asks Rhea to accept her defeat. Prachi says, just like I have destroyed your fake papers, I would wipe off your illegitimate relationship with my husband. She asks her to get her betrayal to defeat. As Prachi, Kholi came into your life and says everything will start happening that has never happened before. Grandma smiles and appreciates Prachi in her heart. Rambro thinks that Prachi is too good and she is right. She doesn't need my help. She can do anything alone. Rhea comes to Prachi and says, wow, what a performance. It was good entertainment, burning the papers and then picking the ashes and blowing it. Rhea says the talk was big, that the judge will not accept the papers, and tells her that these papers were genuine and raised a question mark on you. She says you were trying to expose my lust, but your expression and anger were telling that it is not true, and says if these papers are not important, then you wouldn't have burnt it. Rhea says Prachi burnt the papers as it was raising questions on her identity. She says, what did you say, that these papers will not survive, and says that you are on a survival mode. She says you need some strength and that is why you did this. She says you have lost the test series and says your tour of the Kholi house is over. Rhea says you can be kicked out from signing these papers. Rhea says I don't need fake confidence. I get confidence from this family. She says these papers were not original papers, but these are photocopies. She asks, what do you think? That I will roam around with the papers on which I got your signature by cheat. She says it is kept safely in the locker and says you cannot even see or touch it with anyone's help too. Rhea blows on the ashes and says it is your dream's ashes which you burnt. Rhea says to Prachi that you were not going away from here and asks her not to call the NGO woman as they will not help her as she is now a good person and Prachi is a bad person. Rhea says you haven't signed on just admittance papers but also on divorce papers, even if Rambro doesn't sign on the papers. Rhea says Aunt and Rambro are with me. Rambro nods his head. Prachi thinks that Rambro might got egoistic as she refuses help. Rhea asks if she will go by herself or after thrown out of the house. She says I will speak to my lawyer and goes. She goes and looks at the papers and says Prachi did a big mistake by signing on these papers and she cannot stand in front of me. Shahana keeps an eye on Rhea. Rhea says it is like my marriage certificate and I feel peace. She says Prachi's life is locked here, which would only open on my sayings. Shahana hides. Rhea thinks that she will not tell anyone about these papers and she doesn't want anyone to say it. Prachi comes to her room and finds Shahana sitting there. Shahana says that she has gone out through the window, but the main gate was closed. She says that she saw how she was fighting and burnt the papers. She says something went in her eyes and she went from there. She says then she saw Rhea keeping the papers in the locker. Prachi thinks of Rhea's words. Rambro says that this is not right. I don't know how Prachi signed and says that Rhea will stoop too low to defeat her. He says if I help Prachi, then I will lose my family. Grandma says but you will get Prachi. Rambro says Prachi herself doesn't want my support. He says she tells me clearly always, but I get happy as she is near me. We are in the same house, but we are not together. Rambro says if Prachi doesn't love me, then it is okay, but I will not force her to love me. Grandma says Prachi loves you a lot, but she doesn't express it. Rambro says she is hiding something else from me, and also her feelings. He says until she tells me what is in her heart, then you will not tell her about my feelings. Grandma says it will be too late then. Rambro says Prachi should decide what she wants to do. He asks Grandma to promise that she will not tell anything to Prachi. Grandma promises Rambro that she will not tell whatever they talked about, but she would express her feelings to her. Rambro says I am getting late for office. Shahana asks Prachi what idea she has gotten. Prachi says she has gotten an idea, but she had forgotten. She says Ria spiked my drink and took my signatures. She knew that I can change her plan. She had given me the photocopy smartly and not the original papers, and says it was a conspiracy. Shahana asks what to do now. Grandma says even Prachi would cheat and defeat Ria. Shahana says even you. Grandma says I want to unite Prachi and Rambro. Shahana says even I want to. Prachi says I came here to get my right. Grandma asks how will you get your right? Until you get your husband back. Grandma asks Prachi, did you want Rambro's wealth, property or name? Prachi says no and says I don't want his love and name. Grandma says she likes it when she says that she is Rambro's wife. Prachi says I cannot say that after signing the admittance papers. Shahana says that they should get the papers from Ria's locker. Grandma asks how. Shahana says that she has an idea and says just like Ria spiked Prachi's drink, then we should spike our own drink and take the keys from her. Grandma asks if you are from Ushampur and asks do you think that Ria would drink something from our aunt? She says she gave the photocopy of the document to Prachi cleverly. Shahana asks Prachi to do something. Prachi says she shall get the papers even if she has to burn the house. Grandma and Shahana ask her not to burn the house. Grandma says she has an idea to make Ria plead in front of you. They ask what? Grandma says you cannot do this. Shahana asks her to say this. Grandma says she will think of another idea. Prachi says why did you tell me about the idea then? Shahana asks her to share her idea else they will reject her next idea. Grandma asks her to say sorry and says I know you will reject it as the idea is filming and unique. Shahana says it will work then. Grandma asks if they are both ready and says the Kholi house shall have a raid. Prachi asks a raid? She says raid happens for black money and our companies do dealing in white money. Shahana says we want white papers. Prachi asks do you want to say that we will get the papers in a raid? Grandma says you both shall do the raid and you shall go to Ria's room and steal the papers. Shahana says we don't have the qualifications. Grandma says you need a mustache and a turban and says that you will come in disguise of men. Vikram cancels his meeting and tells Pallavi that he has a feeling that they are doing a mistake. Pallavi asks, why are you thinking like this? Vikram says the way Ria took Prachi's signature on the papers. Pallavi says you are thinking Ria wrong. Vikram says I shall go to the office and says he seems to be right till yesterday and seems to be wrong today. He says I am not in the right frame to think and I shall go to the office. He goes. Aliyah comes to Pallavi. Shahana says that Ria might be thinking that you would attack her from the front, but we would attack her from behind. Prachi asks, what are you saying? Grandma asks her to think and says sometimes Shahana talks wisely. Prachi says how would we go to Ria's room? Dad and Rambro are literate about raid and they knows about the laws. Grandma says this raid would happen when Rambro and Vikram go to the office and says if anyone stops you, then I will undo everyone. Aliyah asks what happened to Vikram. Pallavi says when I got married, I knew that everyone is good at art, but are emotional. He says Vikram has started to see flaws in Ria. Aliyah says Ria has no flaws in her. Pallavi says Vikram thinks that Ria did wrong by taking the signatures on the papers. Aliyah says he seems absolutely fine when everything was happening outside. Pallavi says these things happens with emotion papers and says that they shall do everything fast and they should throw Prachi out before Rambro changes his mind due to Vikram. Aliyah says we still have time and says that Ria went to pack Prachi's bag. Pallavi asks Aliyah to stay in the house until Prachi is gone. Aliyah says Prachi will be outside tomorrow morning. Ria comes there and asks, shall I join the meeting? Ria asks Grandma not to meet Prachi much and says he will miss her when she goes from here. Grandma asks why she will go. Ria says whoever comes shall leave. She has done Prachi's packing and says just the memories are left, which you shall take in art. She is about to take her stuff out. Prachi holds Ria's hand and asks her to leave her bag. Ria says you have become lazy and says I have done my packing to shift to Rambru's room. Prachi says this is my house and I will not leave. Ria says I think you will leave after the court orders. She asks Shahana to stay there for a day and leave it. Ria tells Grandma that she will let her meet Prachi outside the house and not in the house. She asks them to continue with the farewell party. Shahana says I will break her teeth. Prachi says first we will break her ego and tells Grandma that they shall work on her plan. Grandma says you have to wait for Rambru to go to the office. Prachi asks Shahana why did she wait to have food with her. Prachi says she came late due to the baby. She gets emotional. Shahana goes to get water. Prachi recalls Rambru's words. Rambru comes there and sees Prachi sad. A song plays in the background. Rambru takes out his handkerchief and tries to wipe her tears. She stops him and she wipes her tears with her palo. Rambru asks, can I know the reason for your sadness? She nods no. He says, I just want to know. She says she is confused and she doesn't know what she wants. Rambru asks her to talk to him. Prachi says, I meant to say that I have confusion about what I want, but I know clearly what I don't want. I am very clear about that. Rambru asks, what do you want? Prachi says, I don't want you to show sympathy and wipe my tears, and in fact, I don't like you. Thank you for watching. Please like my videos, share it, and please subscribe to my channel for more updates. Thank you.